Yeah. So welcome everybody to the public meeting for the Buffalo Creek Floodplain Reconnection Project. Give you a quick agenda here. We're going to go through some introductions. We'll give you some project background, talk about the goals and objectives of this project. We'll discuss our final design and the findings of that, go through potential benefits and restoration techniques related to the project, and then project timeline. And at the end, we're going to have some time for questions, and there'll be contact information on the presentation as well. So as we go through the presentation, you're going to be muted, but if you have any questions, you can add it to the chat and we can read through them at the end. Or if you want to wait till the end, we can unmute you and you can ask your question. So an overview of who is involved in this project. The project sponsors are Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper and the Town of West Seneca. We have Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper on the phone today. And the project team that did the design was Ramble America's Engineering Solutions, who is on the presentation today. And then we also worked with Atlantic Testing Laboratories to do our geotechnical work, Patriot Design and Consulting that did our survey work, and Morton Archaeological Research Services for our archaeology. So on the phone from BMW, we have Catherine Winkler, who is the project manager. We have with Ramble, we have Michelle McIntyre, who is the project manager on our end, Brian Whitaker, who is the technical manager, and then I'm Lexi Hackford, and I'm one of the project engineers that has worked on this.
Thanks, Lexi. I'm just going to give a quick overview of Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. As Lexi mentioned, we are the project sponsor for this project. Waterkeeper wrote the grant to develop floodplain design plans to help the flooding within the Buffalo Creek watershed. Waterkeeper has been around for 35 years, and this is not an uncommon project for us. We focus on I think it's 7 counties now of Western New York along the Great Lakes, Lake Erie watershed. We are a team of about 25 professionals, ranging from biologists all the way to hydrologists and naturalists, planners, community engagement specialists, all things you can think of to connect our community to the water and protect those waterways. So just some examples of the work that we do: shoreline restoration, outreach and education. We create public access, and we are also constantly monitoring our water quality. So Waterkeeper partnered with or consulted with Ramble engineers for this project. I believe we've been working on it for about 3 years at this point. And it stemmed out of the Resilient New York report. So building off of that, the Ramble team was really able to take it on and run with it and give us some really great final designs. This is our third public meeting that we've had on this project. So we're really excited to show you what all of the work results in.
And some additional project partners that we've been working with throughout the process. We've been working with local, state, and federal organizations. So New York State DEC, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, New York State Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and then United States Fish and Wildlife Service. So to give you some background on the project, as Catherine mentioned, in 2018, as part of the Resilient New York initiative, 48 flood-prone watersheds were selected to undergo flood modeling studies, and Buffalo Creek was one of those ones selected because of the flooding events that the area has seen historically. So that started in 2018. In the winter of 2019, significant ice jam flooding caused the evacuation of the School Street neighborhood. And in 2020, the Resilient New York study was completed and the report was issued, which identified Lexington Green neighborhood as a high flood risk And it also listed some potential mitigation projects to implement to improve that flooding. And again, in the winter of 2022, a severe flooding event caused emergency evacuation of several neighborhoods in the area. Throughout this presentation, we're going to be talking a lot about floodplains. So to give you a little bit of a background on what a floodplain is, it's an area of low-lying ground directly next to a creek or stream, and it's the area that's going to experience flooding during periods of high flow. Basically, it's the area that the creek uses when there's too much water that the channel cannot carry at all. And the photo here is an aerial photo from the project area during a flooding event. And it illustrates the floodplain pretty well. Down the center where it's lighter and you see the ice, that's the actual creek channel. And then on either side where you see that muddy water, that's going to be the floodplain area. And one important thing to understand here, we can't completely stop the water from coming. We don't have control over that. So the goal of the project is just to manage it better. We want to find ways that we can reduce the impacts of the flooding while working with the natural system. So the project that we're implementing here aims to do that through the construction of a flood bench. And a flood bench is an area of low elevation that's constructed directly next to the creek, and it allows water to spread out during high level flows and lowering the overall elevation of the flood. So that's what this image here is showing right now on the top. That's what Buffalo Creek currently looks like. And after we install the flood bench, it's going to look more like the bottom image. And you can think of it like pouring water from a small pot into a larger pot on your stove. The water is going to spread out more and become shallower. So this project has four main objectives. First is to restore the natural floodplain. So like I just talked about, the floodplain is the area where water is naturally going to spread out during high flows. And if we can restore that function, that's going to help the creek handle large water events more safely. Second, we want to reduce long-term flood risk along the creek. And the goal here is not to eliminate flooding entirely, because that's not really possible, but we want to reduce how often and how severely flooding impacts the area. And then the third and fourth goals are really connected to that second one. We're aiming to reduce the long-term flood risk, which in turn should help limit impacts to private properties that border the stream. And when flooding does occur, it leads to significant cleanup and repair costs. So if we can reduce the severity and frequency of those impacts, the project is also going to help reduce the long-term cost of flood recovery for the community. So summarizing those goals, the ultimate objective of the project is to reconnect Buffalo Creek to its floodplain and alleviate flooding in the Lexington Green neighborhood. If we zoom into the objective of our specific project as a firm, it was to perform modeling and analysis of the project site and develop final designs and permits ready for project implementation. And so we just wrapped up our final design phase. If we go back to the beginning of design, this image is showing the parcels that we looked at. So we looked at a series of parcels along this reach of the creek. And to kind of orient yourself, those two triangles at the top center of the page are the baseball diamonds at the Canisius Sports Complex. So we looked at all of these parcels, talked to landowners to see who would be willing to participate and which ones would be good for the project. And in the end, we landed on parcels 3 and 4, so the lime green and the gray parcels. And after design, this is what the flood bench outline looks like spread across those two parcels. And if we zoom out so we can kind of see where that is in relation to everything else, across the top of the screen here, you see Clinton Street. In the upper left-hand corner, again, is the Canisius Sports Complex. And then the dark vertical line is the access road to the flood bench. And so directly to the left of that is the Ursing driving range. And then along the bottom of the page, across the street is going to be across the creek is going to be that Lexington Green neighborhood.
Thanks, Lexi. So I'm just going to take it on from here and kind of go over some of the modeling that we did. So we did do some extensive modeling at each of the different phases of the project to really identify what the extents of the flooding would be at different capacity storms, and then also to look at what the depth of the flooding is. So as Lexi kind of alluded to, really the objective of the project wasn't to eliminate the flooding. It was really to mitigate it, to try to reduce the depth of the flooding along the reach of the creek, especially in the Lexington Green neighborhood, and to reduce the impact to the community. So shown here is, the flooding the modeling is predicting both at existing conditions and proposed conditions with our flood bench. So the existing conditions is the kind of purple looking color, I guess, extents. That shows kind of where the flooding just naturally occurs during a 10-year storm. The area that's kind of in blue kind of shows where that water will kind of start to expand with our flood bench and decrease the depth of the flooding. So again, we're not really impacting or changing the extents of the flooding. It's more changing the depth that the community is going to see. So in the next slide, we show the 100-year flood. So really those are the couple of events that the community saw in 2022 and some of the earlier events where you get some very large storms, the ice jams. You can see the flooding extends out, even further past the creek. There's a couple of areas in pink that kind of show like where the flooding would occur under existing conditions that would not occur with our proposed flood bench. But overall, the extents of the flooding again are about the same, but the depth of the flooding that we're seeing in each of those areas is quite a bit less. And next, we kind of show a table that gives a summary of what the reduction is. So I like to kind of think of it as, during a huge flooding event, we're again not completely eliminating the flooding, but we're reducing it. So hopefully, you're getting ponding in your front yard instead of the floodwaters being so deep in your yard that it's coming in through your front door. So during a 10-year event, we're seeing about a 0.7 foot decrease in the depth of the water that would be reaching those communities. And then for a 50-year storm or higher, we see about a foot reduction due to that floodplain and really allowing the waters to spread out. And kind of this just gives like another depiction of what Lexi was referring to with the pot of water. So really showing you what the terrain could look like before and after the floodplain bench. So again, we're not changing the volume or the flow rate kind of going through Buffalo Creek, but we're allowing or giving an area that can kind of spread out. And so by allowing it to spread out into the floodplain, we're decreasing the depth. And hopefully decreasing the depth will then limit the impact to the surrounding infrastructure and community instead of significantly impacting that infrastructure. So besides decreasing, the impact on the community, there's a lot of benefits to flood benches and floodplains. So wanted to, present some of those to you guys. They're very sustainable. They're environmentally friendly. They're very natural looking. It's not a permanent barrier. It will kind of restore the shoreline to what it normally would have looked like before all the flooding or the changes had occurred. Um, there's very little maintenance, which is a huge impact to the community or a huge benefit to the community in that the town of West Seneca won't be taken on a project that they need to do a lot of maintenance and repair over the years. So they'll have a conservation easement, but it will be very limited maintenance, very natural, just some debris cleanup, sporadically as storms occur. It also allows the community and the landowners to still access the creek and the land and really provides like a very scenic place to go to.
Michelle, you accidentally muted yourself, or somebody muted you.
Okay, thank you. So another benefit is it provides an area for that water to expand out to be stored. Prevents kind of erosion as the or the waters are coming down Buffalo Creek. It naturally is going to give it a place to settle out for that debris to collect. With the different types of plantings that we're proposing along the floodplain, it will kind of naturally filter out some of that debris and sediment. So will help to maintain the water quality too. And did want to present you guys with a couple of pictures and photos of what a typical floodplain restoration would look like. So the floodplain restoration will have a series of 3 different types of vegetation with it. So it'll be a combination of floodplain meadows, emergent wetlands, and then a scrub shrub. So the emergent wetlands will be at the lowest points of the floodplain and along the low-lying water areas. Um, the scrub shrub will be right along the shoreline. Those will kind of help with the sediment erosion control and also with protecting the shoreline. They'll also be at some of the higher elevations. And then we'll have some of the floodplain meadows. They'll be about 40 to 45% of the area. We also have put in several small little ponds of emergent wetlands throughout the floodplain to really provide some pockets where we can cultivate some different habitats for hopefully different types of species. So some more aquatic habitats. So project timeline, as Lexi alluded to, this project, officially kind of started with the Resilient New York initiative back in 2018. We started on this preliminary kind of design phase going into final design in 2022 with Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. We're currently just finished final design and going into permits. We are working with Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper to find funding for the project. And as long as funding is secured, we're hoping to start implementing the project in 2027. And then just some contact information. So definitely, feel free to reach out to anyone if you have questions. So Gary Dickerson is the contact of the Town of West Seneca, Catherine Winkler at Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, and then you can reach, Brian Whitaker, who's the technical manager, or myself or Lexi at Ramble with any questions afterwards.
Hey, thank you, Michelle and Lexi. We don't have any questions in the chat. Does anyone on the call have any questions? If so, you can unmute yourself and we can we can answer them as we go.
Hi, Catherine. Hi, everyone. It's Evelyn Hicks from Town of West Seneca.
Yeah. Hi, Evelyn.
Hello there. Thank you for doing this, following up and having the public meeting. I don't know how many are on the call, but hopefully it'll be spread far and wide and everyone will have a chance to look at it. But um, with regard to the habitat that you hope to create there, will there be like any planned vernal pools? Is it possible that we're going to be able to get some salamanders back in that area?
Yeah, I can take that one, Evelyn. This is Brian Whitaker. We did incorporate, I think there's 4 or 5 different locations where
Uh-huh.
we included some pools, and they're, I think, 2 to 3 feet deep, something like that. They'll be planted in the same emergent wetland planting
Right.
scheme to provide that habitat that you're looking for.
Okay, good, good. Because I have talked to a couple people in town and they claim, I've never seen it, but they claim to have found some salamanders like under like piles of wood or under a rock or something like that.
Mhm.
But we don't have any actual empirical knowledge of that. So,
Yeah, and
Up
Brian,
on,
can you touch upon how the lack of maintenance of the site will really help with amphibians, nesting habitat, all of that as well?
Yeah, I think once things are, once the different restoration techniques are established, it's really, you take that hands-off approach and let nature do what it needs to do.
mhm.
And you're not in there with heavy equipment maintaining it, and nature's just allowed to flourish in those locations.
Okay.
Yeah, and all the down logs that are coming from upstream, any of that is just going to provide more habitat.
That's
So
right.
it's going to be very minimal maintenance for the town um, moving forward.
That's right.
Are, under the new DEC laws, will this qualify as a protected wetland for New York State?
It's likely that it will. We can't. I can't predict that for certain, but that's kind of the habitat that we're creating would be what DEC is looking at as some of these special wetland areas, specifically mentioning vernal pools and habitat for salamanders and frogs,
Mm-hmm.
other amphibians.
Good. I know up at the big oxbow, downstream, we have some very big snapping turtles in there. So, I mean, I don't know if we have any salamanders there. I've never seen any,
Yeah,
but
and
we have huge snapping turtles in there.
a lot of turtles in general.
Yeah.
Say it again, Catherine.
There's a lot of turtles there in
Oh,
general. They love that area.
yeah, the pink turtles and yeah,
So hopefully they'll, slowly move
good.
upstream.
Hmm. And will there be an opportunity for beavers to infiltrate this site, or won't it be um, attractive to them?
Um, Probably no more attractive to them than it is now,
Okay.
because the main channel sort of remains intact. We're not moving or modifying the main channel, just
Hmm.
creating the additional flood bench that is only activated really, during high flow.
Okay.
Everything else, everything up to bank full, like that 2 to 3 year storm stays within the existing channel.
All right. So they won't have any opportunity to alter the schematic the way it's drawn because the flow will be too high for them to make an impact. So they won't bother with it.
Um, yeah, I think if it's not an area that they like now, we're not going to be changing that
Oh,
with the design. So I don't think they would be in there in the future.
okay. Well, that's good.
We'll put some signs up too.
Yes.
Oh,
Keep
yeah,
them out.
like that. The deer are the same way.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate your answers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. Anyone else have any other questions? Okay. If not, we can wrap up this presentation. The presentation has been recorded, as was mentioned earlier. We will be, within a day or two, uploading it to our YouTube channel, which will then be linked on our website. And we will be sharing this. I think there's some other ways too. We'll get this out to you guys. We'll figure it out. But thank you so much, Lexi and Michelle and Brian, for participating, and everyone who joined us here tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Have a great one.